Picture this. You're in the greatest shape of your life, have success in every endeavor you set your mind to, and have a loving family with beautiful children. You're loved by millions of people around the world and feel as though you're invincible. And then you're told it may all go away.
We did find a couple of things that are a cause for concern. That means you have an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease, probably somewhere between 8 and 10 times higher.
Last year, Chris Hemsworth was part of a 6-episode National Geographic docuseries called Limitless, where he, with the help of various experts and professionals, pushed himself to the absolute physical and mental limits of what the human body is capable of. He plunged himself into the freezing cold waters of the Norwegian Arctic, climbed a rope over thousands of feet, and even tested his willpower by fasting for 4 full days while attempting various physical activities fueled only by his own body's energy reserves. In the clip from episode 5 on brain health, Hemsworth takes a variety of medical tests, then meets with longevity specialist Dr. Peter Attia to discuss any potentially interesting biomarkers. Now, most of the results from the numerous tests were actually very positive, but the one result that was a cause for concern was his test in regards to the results relating to a gene known as ApoE4, which is a gene commonly linked to a large increased risk for dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So, does that mean Chris has Alzheimer's? Short answer is no, but it's a little more nuanced than that. So let's first take a look at why this all happened. The ApoE gene in question provides genetic instructions for synthesizing a protein called apolipoprotein E. This protein combines with fats, or lipids, in the body to form molecules known as lipoproteins, which are responsible for packaging, distribution, and metabolism of cholesterol and other fats through the bloodstream, one of the destinations being the brain. The brain in particular is a selfish little organ, as it only comprises 3% of our entire body weight, but requires 25% of our caloric intake to sustain itself. Fat also accounts for 60% of the brain's composition, so the transportation of these lipids to the neurons by this alipoprotein E is crucial for longevity and healthy cognitive function. Now, there are 3 main allele varieties of ApoE, each having a different link to neurodegenerative diseases due to their differences in lipid and receptor binding efficiency. So ApoE2, ApoE3, and ApoE4. Because ApoE is a lipoprotein, it's made up of a sequence of amino acids like all proteins in our body. These 3 human ApoE variations, or isoforms, start to differ from one another in the protein sequence at 2 different amino acid positions, numbers 112 and 158, each having a different combination of amino acids at these sites. These amino acid differences are enough to change the lipid and receptor binding ability of ApoE, thus having this varying relationship with Alzheimer's. But let's take a look at the last variation, ApoE4, which is the version that Chris has. It's actually present in about 14% of the population, and is where the concern lies, as having this variation can increase risk for Alzheimer's disease and is associated with an early age of disease onset. ApoE4 differs from the other 2 versions in the sense that the amino acids in positions 112 and 158 create something called a domain interaction between the N-terminal receptor binding domain and the C-terminal lipid binding domain, which basically means it's depositing less cholesterol than what ApoE2 and ApoE3 would. But remember, you're an equal mix of genes from both your mom and dad. We're each born with 2 alleles at the ApoE gene and can have any combination of the 3 different alleles mentioned above. For example, you can have E2 and E2, E2 and E3, E3 and E3, and so on. Having a heterozygous or 1 copy of the ApoE4 gene from one parent may increase the risk 2 to 3-fold, but having a homozygous or 2 copies, one from each parent, like in Chris's case, would be a potential cause for concern, as now the increased risk from the aforementioned 2 to 3 times goes to about 8 to 10 times higher than someone without this genetic predisposition. Another thing to note are the 3 variations and their relationship to something called amyloid beta plaques, which is a hallmark pathology of Alzheimer's disease. These amyloid beta plaques build up in the brain over time, but with certain cases, like with ApoE2, is shuttled away before problematic incidents can occur. As you might imagine, ApoE4 is the worst at doing this task, not only being able to transport the least amount of cholesterol to the brain, but also being able to take away the least amount of amyloid beta plaques.
What's this? What are you doing?
This isn't me. Loki.
And this is consistent with studies that have come out over the years. In March of 2020, animal and test tube studies have shown that ApoE plays a role in the accumulation of beta amyloid proteins, meaning that, for example, in mice, more accumulation occurred in those with ApoE4 compared with other ApoE forms. In April of 2009, a study showed that even people without any cognitive impairment have more of this beta amyloid protein in their brains if they have the ApoE4 allele.
Oh, you gotta be shitting me.
Say, for example, you're an individual who carries 1 or 2 copies of this ApoE4 gene. Are there any preventative measures that I can take to lower the risk, or am I just screwed? Turns out the answer is yes, there are solutions, and the biggest solutions are probably the easiest and well-known. Let's take diet, for example. The kinds of foods you eat have a direct and profound effect on the longevity and health span of your body, which includes the prevention of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease. Those with the ApoE4 allele may have a more exaggerated response than normal to certain nutritional risk factors. This means that a healthy diet is extra healthy and a harmful diet is extra harmful. One study followed almost 1,500 healthy people for 21 years to see who would develop Alzheimer's in later life. Those who ate a diet low in polyunsaturated fats and higher in saturated fats had an increased risk, but that risk was amplified further in those with the ApoE4 allele. Our findings suggest that physical activity, sufficient intake of polyunsaturated fatty acids, and avoiding excess saturated fatty acid intake, alcohol drinking, and smoking may decrease the risk or postpone the onset of dementia, especially among the ApoE4 carriers. So, clearly, the relationship between exercise and good diet choices versus the prevention of all forms of disease can't be ignored, as the benefits of muscle mass and good cardiovascular health are paramount for longevity.